what we're in right now is what Baba calls the new life. Baba started his new life on the 1st of January 1949. We got this letter stating Baba had entered the new life, which he called the end of the false beginning and the beginning of the true end. And from there on, events went very rapidly. Those of you who followed Baba's life know that at the end of 1949, he gave up the ashrams. He took just a few mandali with him and led the life of helplessness and hopelessness, which was an extraordinary period where they went actually begging their food and so on throughout India. Very little was ever put down about the new life. It was only in later years. It was probably so intense that they just couldn't, deal with it in the same way. For example, we had family letters in the previous and following years, which told us a lot about Baba's activities. But the new life, they were wandering through India, and so it wasn't documented that much. But finally, it was Don Stevens and others, and Rick helped to publish the story of the new life as told by Erich, Meira, Mani, and Meru. And this is a fascinating little book of recollection of this period in Baba's life. It's one of the only ones that does document it, aside from another book which just gives the circulars day by day, orders of Baba and things like that. And they give their emotional feelings about what happened and the little anecdotes and so on. One thing that was very significant, which kind of emphasized the whole thing, was a poem called The Song of the New Life, which Baba wrote. They all kind of wrote it together, actually, and it was taken down. They used to repeat it on their trip. And I thought we'd kind of analyze this song of the new life, because Baba did say this new life would go on even though there's nobody left to live it. And we sometimes wonder where we are in Baba's cycle, and we are sort of still in this new life cycle. And what Baba meant by it completely is still part of a mystery. It kind of gives us clues, though. This is the song of the new life. Listen to the silent words of Meher Baba. The life of all lovers of God is in these words. You who are serious to follow the new life will renounce your ephemeral existence. We have taken to this life in which we rely only upon God. Our will is strengthened by our oath. We merrily sing the song of hopelessness. We invite all calamities and difficulties. We neither wail over lost hopes nor complain about promises, or covet honor, or shun disgrace. Backbiting is ended, and we do not fear anyone. This is the tenor of our new life. No confusion in the mind now, neither are any ties left. Pride, anger, lust, and greed are all sloughed off. No religion for any of us, nor care for physical and mental aims. The Sheikh and the Brahmin are now in the same boat. There is for us all no small or great, neither disciple, master, nor godhood exist. Brotherliness is the link, and our common enjoyment of suffering. This world or the next, hell or heaven, we are no longer concerned with. Shaktis and siddhis, occultism and miracles, we are no longer plagued with. Now we live with the active present. Dear ones, take seriously the words of Baba. This is a quote, although now I am on the same level with you, yet all orders from me, good, bad, or extraordinary, you should carry out immediately, leaving the result to God. Even if the heavens fall, do not let go the hand of truth. Let not despair or disappointment ravage and destroy the garden of your life. You beautify it by contentment and self-sufficiency. Even though your heart be cut to bits, let a smile be on your lips. Here I divulge to you a truth. Hidden in your empty hands is treasure untold. Your beggarly life is the envy of kings. God exists indeed, and true are the prophets. Every cycle has an avatar, and every moment a Wali. For us, however, it is only hopelessness and helplessness. How else can I describe to you what our new life is? I thought I'd go back over it a little bit. And the gist of it, you see, is total surrender of all hopes and expectations, or attachments, or striving for honor and fame. You're absolutely detached if good things happen or bad things. And one of the conditions in this list of conditions that those who went had to agree with was not to show any disturbance. In other words, if something they were upset, they didn't show it. And there was one classic example of this Mandali who was with Baba, and they all had to sign these conditions to go. And of course, who went also was picked by Baba, though they also volunteered. This man had a daughter. There was no correspondence allowed, too, with families, but somehow a telegram was sent by the family saying the daughter was going to be married, and she wanted her father at the wedding. And you know how Maya does, this letter came, and somehow the man read it. And the daughter said in the telegram, if you don't come to my wedding, father, that's it, it's total cut off. And the father was very disturbed, and he was weeping, and then Baba comes by and says, what's happened? And so the thing came out, and Baba sent him away. That was the condition of the new life, that you were not disturbed. And he was disturbed by this table. Now that seems very severe. But on the other hand, you have to realize this new life was the crowning test of years of being with Baba. So it's like you imagine the ultimate behavior of being with Baba is this complete surrender and complete detachment. And yet Baba tells us we are now in this new life phase. And so it's a hint for all of us. But there's interesting things in it too, like no confusion in the mind now, nor any ties left. Pride, anger, lust, and greed are gone. No religion, and no care for physical or mental aims. In other words, there's sort of a hint here that our confusion comes from having all these things bothering us, pride, anger, lust, and greed. There's no small or great. And I'll bet that a lot of our disturbance is small or great. If someone speaks roughly to you, then you're upset because it makes you small. But on the other hand, somebody might puff you up and make you great. And so Baba was saying, you have to be detached from whatever opinions of others. Brotherliness is the link. Everybody was in the same boat. Baba as Baba, companion. They were called the New Life Companions. That word was used. And everybody had the same conditions. Even Baba, took care of his own washed out his own dish, and everybody slept the same way on the ground. Everybody begged for their food. This is the only picture, this one on the cover. No pictures were allowed in the new life. But somehow somebody, of course, there's always one snapped, you know. There's Baba and Audie. They've been out begging, and there's the little canister they have in India, the little tin cans that they got their food in.
Phyllis, could I interject a point?
Yes.
Eric was talking about the point about begging for food in the new life. And he says that, in a way, what we should do now is beg for his grace, the same way that they would go around and beg for food.
That's a beautiful point. However, some of us may be put in the condition of poverty. We don't know what actually may happen to humanity in this new life phase. It might be true that we'll all be very, very hungry and have to beg for food. Things like that can happen. This world or the next, hell or heaven, we are no longer concerned with. Shaktis and siddhis. Shaktis means powers. Siddhis are occult powers. Occultism and miracles we are no longer plagued with. And I like that word, plagued, because, people get very upset if they don't get a healing. There's so many groups now that are into healing. I'm not putting down anybody else's work, but for Baba lovers, we're not expecting Baba to give us healings and miracles, occult powers. Tantric yoga is being taught by many groups, and this is awakening, this Kundalini yoga, which does give you powers, occult abilities, and so on. Just the opposite of what Baba is stressing. All false impressions have been purged from the mind. Now we live in the active present. And to me that was a very significant line. We live in the active present, because if you live in that absolute now, you can't worry about the then. You can't worry about the past, and you can't worry about the future. This is the ultimate way to live with God as God's companion, or the companion of God, is to just share moment to moment the way they did in the new life, just being with Him and not worrying about the next moment. They didn't know where they were going to sleep, they didn't know whether they would eat, and sometimes even drink. They had no protection from the weather, and they had many problems, just subsistence problems. But they weren't worried about it, nor could they show being upset about it. And it was even hard for them, who had shared Baba's life in the ashram, which always was at a minimal level anyway, and not like, when we were entertained there with elaborate food at times, and Baba very concerned about our comfort and everything. That was not the way the Mandalay lived with Baba at Meherazad. They have, as you've seen, just a very minimal kind of existence, and food was simple, very simple. So even for them, though, this life of begging and travel was not easy for them either. We neither wail over lost hopes nor complain about promises, or covet honor or shun disgrace. Backbiting is ended, and we do not fear anyone. Well, that's fearing, we do fear people. We fear our bosses, we fear our spouses, in little ways. Maybe not getting panicked, but, come home and the soup's not ready or whatever, get a blast, get a shot, come in late to work or whatever. Even if the heavens fall, do not let go the hand of truth. Even if the heavens fall, or the earth shakes, or whatever disaster shows up, personal or maybe a group disaster. I remember Dr. Deshmukh, this was in '69, He was the one that worked on the discourses, as you know, and he was professor of philosophy at the university in Nagpur and so on. Very bright and intellectual man, but in his last years he got a little windy, you know. He would go on and on and on. So they had already, at 69, when he got up, you know, Audie was right there tugging on his coattails now, you know, just a few words, doctor. And all he got up and said was, quoting Baba, "Even if the heavens fall, do not let go the hand of truth." And he sat down. And it was so great to just hear him say it, you know, in that real strong way. Let not despair or disappointment ravage and destroy the garden of your life. You beautify it by contentment and self-sufficiency. You know, we can have things happen just totally out of the blue, like we had recently in the group with Sue and Al Angelo, you know, things that you just have no way of knowing. And it's a very hard thing to deal with. Even though your heart be cut to bits, let a smile be on your lips. Here I divulge to you a truth. Hidden in your empty hands is treasure untold. Your beggarly life is the envy of kings. And that's going to be true in history. The life the Mandali led, and especially this life, the new life, everybody will say, oh, if I could only have been there, you know. Just like those people would say, oh, I wish I could have walked with Jesus or Muhammad or whatever. It was a priceless privilege to be there with Baba. I'm thinking about your heart being cut to bits. I don't know how many of you know Nashirwan, what's his last name? Anzar, Nashirwan Anzar. He's a young man devoted to Baba. He puts out the Glow magazine. Well, a very, very heartbreaking thing has happened to me. He has a little boy, 4.5 years old. And just recently they diagnosed some galloping leukemia. And they said, you know, the little child has only a few weeks to live. So he brought the child over to America, and he's in the hospital now in Oakland or Berkeley area. And they're giving him all this chemotherapy that's very, very doubtful if the child will live. And the parents, Nashirwan and his wife, are there every minute by this little boy's bedside. They got him in the hospital through a Baba lover, a woman doctor. They didn't want to admit the child, but she said, you know, my job's on the line. I'm leaving if you don't have this child here. And they got him into the hospital. And the cheerfulness of the parents going through this really tragic thing has impressed the whole hospital and everybody. I mean, it's created a big thing there. The parents are there with the child, and they're, you know, because of their love for Bob and their understanding, they're dealing with it. They're, you know, in this new life way, not showing all this. I mean, what worse situation can you be in? I mean, they're just being a fantastic example. God exists indeed, and true are the prophets. Every cycle has an avatar, and every moment a wali. Well, the cycle of the avatar, you know, Baba has explained the cycle is from 700 to 1400 years. And, for example, Muhammad was born in 625 AD, and then Baba was born in 1894. That's just about the limit, 1400 years. And then when we were with Baba, Baba would say, I'm coming again in 700 years. So where does 700 years bring us up to? 700. 26 AD. 2600 AD, right? 2700 AD. Every moment has a wali. A wali is on the spiritual hierarchy. The peers are on the 6th plane, and the walis are on the 5th plane. So every moment has a saint. That's what was saying here. Somewhere in Baba's writings, he explains how the avatar works. I'm kind of digressing here, but he said, of course, he works through the hierarchy. The avatar gives orders to the peers, gives his order to the peers. The peers give it to the wallies. The wallies give it to the direct agents, the indirect agents, and then the indirect agents create the situation in the gross world that the avatar was planning. It's sort of a digression. There's this hierarchy. All of you who haven't read God Speaks, I'm not asking for a show of hands. 10 times. Baba said to read it 10 times. It does explain all these very interesting points about how the destiny of the world is guided. For us, however, it is only hopelessness and helplessness. How else can I describe to you what our new life is? Song composed by Dr. Ghani, October 31, 1949. That's just about when they set out on this incredible new life phase. And there's a little story I thought I'd read. See whether it's too long. Well, there are many interesting stories about the new life. One of them, this is kind of too long to read, it's 3 or 4 pages, but it was very, very cold. They'd gone up into North India, and they had really not proper bedding and clothes and everything. And then it's just like this one man, for one reason he didn't really know, he ordered a lot of clothing and blankets, and it was just like he just found one of the mandali and gave them all this material that helped them save them, because they're all getting terrible colds and things. So sometimes Baba sweetened their way, with these little details like that. And through this, this man became a lover of Baba. He really didn't know anything about Baba. It's kind of an interesting story. Then Baba came back from the new life and took up again. The ashram, you might want to know, was to be sold. Both places, Meherabad and Meherzad. Many of you have been there. And they did sell most of their belongings, and the cash was given to those mandali who'd been dependent on Baba and who were not going on the new life to sustain them, as a living while they were on the new life. But it was Meherji who, with Dada Chanji, Mr. Naraman Dada Chanji, who bought the land of the 2 ashrams and kept it while they were on the new life, and then they came back to it. So that was kind of a sacrifice on their part. They just couldn't see, having this thing all just disbanded. But I remember a very touching gift was given to us when they were disbanding the ashram. Mehra went into the garden, Mehra's garden, and picked flowers on the last day they were going to leave, and pressed them and sent them to a few of us. I'm sorry that I lost mine. I don't know what. I must have pressed it into some book. I don't know what. I always felt sorry about that. So it was, and that, you can't imagine living through this. It was a very, very, because Baba was saying also that he might drop the body then. I hadn't met Baba then, so it was kind of, wow, I may never meet Baba. He may drop the body, I may never see him. Nobody knew the end of this new life. And in this first statement, in 1949, Baba said, I am facing a great personal disaster now. We didn't know what that meant. We hadn't any idea. And then he was saying he might drop the body. 99% possibility, And I feel my own interpretation of the new life was an example for humanity. I think in one way or another we will all have to face a new life situation, whether it's in a personal life situation of hopelessness and helplessness, or whether all humanity will have to go through some vast type of a situation where we all will have to act totally dependent on God and totally relating to each other as brothers. We will have to, like Bob, they use the words that apply to India. The Sheikh and the Brahmin are sailing in the same boat, But here you might say Mrs. Vanderbilt and and Mr. X at the bottom from Skid Row. We'll all be in the same boat. And that means really we'll all be on the same level somewhere in a situation. We will have to be brothers to each other. I think that this is sort of a hint from Baba, this whole new life phase. And it's interesting that some of the Musts predicted that too, that, the world will have to go through some convulsion. And like the Nilkanth Walla Must said, man will have to eat grass. In other words, there just won't even be food. We'll have to eat grass. We may have to face some of these conditions, and I think this was the hint Baba was giving in the new life for all of us. So you can start cultivating wheatgrass in your backyard. People do live on wheatgrass. We're the health freaks here. But to me it was, when Baba dropped the body, that was, of course, a great turning point, knowing that one would never see him physically again. But for me, actually, and for many of us, this new life phase was more of a complete shock and turnover, that Baba didn't want us to look up to him as a master. He said, my Nazir won't be on you. Nazir means the eye, the spiritual eye. We can't pray to him anymore for miracles, for help, for all that. We just had to accept him like a brother on the path. And of course, Erich tells these very interesting stories about the new life. There's the story about the dove. At the very last day of the new life, they were, Chris, what's the name of that place they were at? What? Manpur Mosque. There's some nice slides of it. I think Chris took one. It's sort of an abandoned mosque, and they made themselves comfortable there for the night, but it was inhabited by a lot of birds, pigeons. And Baba's always been very, very sensitive to noise. For example, they gave an electric generator to the ashram, and he didn't like it, because of the noise, so they never had any electric light until now. For his spiritual work, absolute silence, absolute quiet was very, very necessary. Anyway, one of the orders in the new life was that even if Baba, you had to obey his order. That was one order. And if he did not obey an order in the new life, the Mandali should tell him. That was the second order. And a third thing in the new life was not to hurt anything at all. Anyway, Baba calls Erich and tells him to get rid of the birds that were making the noise. And he's just about to do it, throw the bird out of the nest. And then Baba clapped his hand and said, no, leave it. And the next morning, he scolded Erich, saying, you should have reminded me that I was not to hurt anything. You see. So this often happened with Baba, give you two orders that might seem to conflict. So for that, where Baba gave an order to throw the bird out, the Mandali had each one to, by Baba's order, come up and slap him. Yeah, well, they could not hurt him. Yes, he was getting angry. Yeah, right. And so they had to do what probably is the most difficult thing of all, which was to hit Baba. I think that
with a sandal.
With a sandal, yeah, with their sandal.
And spit on it.
And spit on it. Well, thanks. I'm getting all help telling the story. I think that must have been very, very difficult. So this new life ended with a very difficult situation of obeying Baba. But when Baba came in 52, that's when I met him in Myrtle Beach, he still was in the new life. Now, one of the conditions of the new life was that you could not bow down to him and or touch his feet. And I wanted so much to touch Baba's feet. I've been dreaming of this ever since I heard of Baba. So I had bought a pair of sandals for him. And I knew his size, so I said, Baba, I have a gift of sandals for you. And then I put on the sandals, you see, so I could get to touch Baba's feet. And his eyes were twinkling, you know, he knew I had outfoxed him a little bit. And Baba would always kind of let you do little things. It's just the same when all this period, no correspondence was allowed. You know, there were long periods at the end in the 60s and also in these 40s, in the new life phase, we were not allowed to write or telegraph, of course, phone was out. But we were allowed in 1948, or 49, after Baba had declared that this new life would start, we were allowed to write one letter, but not expect an answer. Do you remember that, Dana? Did you write your letter?
Well, it was before.
When did you meet
54.
Baba? When did you meet Baba?
54.
Oh, then it wasn't. And so each had this chance to write this one letter. And I had a sister who was very ill, and I wrote Baba about that rather than writing something about myself. And Baba did send me an answer. And I'll never forget the first sentence was, everything happens by God's will. And the situation with my sister is very sad, and it really was a tremendous thing for him, for me to absorb that, you know, that the worst thing that can happen to you is still God's will. And that was like part of the new life, for me to digest all that. And so Baba was merciful there in answering, but he didn't answer everybody. Baba was very odd about correspondence. First of all, he never read anything. He would take a letter, you know, they'd hand him his letters, you know, and he'd just go like that. Never read them, you know, he'd just get them. Or he'd go around with all these letters in his pocket, unread letters. And sometimes he'd dictate answers through Erich or whoever was given the secretary's job. And others he didn't answer at all. It was always kind of a puzzle. And there were some people, I know that we had people coming to the group and they might write a letter to Bob and never get an answer. And we were getting answers all the time. So it was kind of, you know, sometimes you're put in a kind of, you just have to accept Bob or whatever he does. And other times Baba would answer without you writing. That was another thing. By cable. I've probably told you this story a couple of times, but well, for example, the first time I was invited to give a talk here in L.A. by a little tiny bookstore, Cosmic Star bookstore, and I was giving my slide talk on evolution, and that was inspired by God Speaks. This sort of the whole talk that God Speaks, evolution of consciousness. And I had left Mattel where I worked and did not go home. I went straight to this little bookstore to give my talk. But when I got home that night, there was a cable on my door from Baba that said, "Very happy you are giving a talk on God Speaks." Now, I had not written anybody or anything. And I thought it was kind of Baba's blessing to go on with this work here in Los Angeles, because that was way back. That was in 1962 or something like that. And anyway, that's how Baba works. You can just... Or another time I had a big problem in my head that I couldn't deal with. I couldn't talk to anybody about it because it would involve, you know, people. And I was really disturbed about it. And I come home from work, and there's the cable from Baba answering my question, telling me what to do, how to solve it. And even if I had sent him a cable, I wouldn't have gotten back that fast. If I'd cabled him my problem, I wouldn't have gotten back the answer. So Baba had, it's hard to imagine someone with that type of fantastic universal mind. But Baba told us one time, he said, all knowledge comes to me automatically. In other words, the yogi has to sweat to figure out what's happening or to read your mind or something, but all knowledge comes to the perfect master or the avatar automatically. It's like a giant, just like you're looking here, you automatically see everything. You're not really working at it, it's just automatic. So I thought Baba's New Life phase was really interesting for all of us. And of course, after I met him, Baba did have the personal disaster that he predicted. And yet that first week when I was with him, he gave no, sign of worrying or distress or anything, although only a few days later he had this terrible accident in America, in Oklahoma. There were just a few little hints, like one day he was seated with us all and he said, I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 22. Did anybody guess it? And we all tried to guess. And the last person, it was Adele, said 11. And Baba nodded. And I felt something in his eyes. I don't know. Something clicked that it was, that wasn't a meaningless thing for him to say that. And it was exactly 11 days after that Baba had the accident. And then another little hint was the Monday after the open day darshan, May 17th, this was May 18th, Baba's whole mood changed, the weather changed, everything was very stormy, and Baba's eyes are, different. See, I had only seen the happy, loving side of Baba for a whole week. He spoiled us, he was with us, he was smiling, he was just giving us a wonderful time of his company, his darshan. And then on that Monday, everything changed, and I was coming down the walk in Myrtle Beach, there across the lagoon. Baba beckoned to me, and of course he had the board then in 52, and he said, call Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth's cabin was right near, so I knocked on her door. She wasn't quite dressed yet, but she came out, and Baba was there, and he looked at her very seriously and said, where are your insurance papers? Now, Elizabeth, 5 or 6 insurance policies. And Baba said, she said, they're in the trunk, in the bottom of the trunk in Yupon Dunes, in the cellar of her house. And Baba said, get them, have them with you, And of course, if she hadn't had all that insurance, the accident would have been really, difficult to deal with. And another little hint was sort of a strange thing. Charmian Deuce, the woman who gave the talk here last Friday, is a very good driver. And so she had the whole trip lined out on a map. They were going to drive across the country. And Baba came in and she said, oh, Baba, can't I drive you? She wanted to be the driver. And Baba shook his head and looked very, again, something in his eyes, And as I looked at her map, I saw this trip line all in red, and it stopped right in the middle of the United States. Now, I know that wasn't the way her map was drawn, because they were going straight on to Los Angeles, to Merrimack, not so forth. So that was kind of a little occult flash. But the look in Baba's eyes, And the one who was driving, of course, was Elizabeth, who all her life had been an excellent driver. She drove an ambulance in World War I, and she just is sort of someone wedded to her car, She doesn't even go 1 foot without getting in a car to go somewhere. And she has these typical good drivers in scares, just nerves of steel, just tremendous control over the whole thing. And she told us how, at the moment of the accident, just before the accident, Baba put out his hand like that, and she looked up and she saw then barreling down the middle of the road, this car going at tremendous speed, and it's a narrow road, and it had just rained, so the ditches were muddy, and she had this split-second decision to make whether to hit head-on or to go into the ditch to swerve, and she thought if she went into the ditch, she'd turn over the car, and that would be more dangerous, so she hit head-on. And that meant, though, I'm not a driver, I can't tell what that means, but she herself, the wheel crushed her, all her ribs were broken, and the wheel went, a jagged fragment went right near this nerve here, just a fraction more, and she would have been dead. But she sat there without a moan or a cry, anything, demanding any attention at all, until the ambulance came and took care of Baba and Meera, who were the most badly injured, and Meru, and Mani was upset. She wasn't hurt, but she was hysterical. And then finally, when all of them, then, she called attention to herself. Now that's gutsy, I'll tell you. Baba really picked. And then the other little story about the accident. I don't know why I'm getting into this. You see, my mind just floats around. But way back in Harmon on the Hudson, when she really had first met Baba, Elizabeth was in the garden there, wherever. Baba picked a little flower, and he said, "Mark the date and keep this flower. Mark the date, today's date, and keep this flower." Well, she pressed it in a book, and years later, it was in a family Bible or something, long afterwards, she opens it up, and there it is, and it was May 24th, 1932. Now, the accident was May 24th, 1952. So that's how long ahead of time Baba planned his personal disaster. Yeah.
What happened with you on the beach when Baba was walking?
Oh, that was very strange. I never knew, you have these flashes with Baba. Being with Baba, Baba keeps everything very normal, just like your gross eyes see everything very normal, but somehow you feel in the background something else is going on, different layers of things are going. I'm sure someone with real illumination can see everything, but you as a gross conscious person, you do get little tickles, you get little hints that just a lot is going on that you just... For example, what Charlie was mentioning was I was walking on the beach with Baba and the women early in the morning. We had a chance to do that every morning. And Baba went way ahead. And his footprints were in the sand. And I thought, gee, how neat. I'll put my feet in Baba's footprints. But I caught up with Baba. And he had been bending down and laying his cane on the sand in a certain direction. I have a very good sense of direction, plus having lived at the center a long time. And it was pointing like southwest. Yeah. He stood up, he straightened up, and he held out his hand. Now, I didn't see him pick anything off the sand at all. He had laid the cane down. And his hand was a shell. And he said to me, and I didn't realize at that time he wasn't speaking verbally. He just made the voice in my head. Give this shell to Meera. And so I immediately turned around, went back and gave the shell to Meera, who was very happy to get it, because it turned out she was collecting shells for India. But it was afterwards that I kind of figured out, and the peculiar feeling of intense working of Baba, laying that cane, and giving me the shell and everything. You know how Baba used you as a little tiny symbolic pawn there and lots of things to do. I think he was planning the direction of his trip and of the accident, you see, laying that cane there, because cane, is like a wand. And giving me the shell, and giving the shell to Meera. Now, Meera was badly, badly hurt in the accident. Her forehead, she doesn't know to this day how badly her forehead was crushed, which is like a shell of this the skull is like a shell. And she was, the doctor, Dr. Dell isn't here, kept think of the name of the doctor, gave her up for dead. They were working on Baba, they were working on Meru. And Burleson, thank you. And Baba kept making motions to take care of Meera, but they thought that it was all over. But then he did go, and they picked this huge splinter of glass out of it. You can see that scar on her. To get back to what I think, it was sort of a symbolic thing, like Baba was planning the accident, planning her injury, and it was something like that it was somehow connected, very important, with America and with woman. You see, Meera does represent to Baba Maya, the whole cosmic illusion, and woman, because she's his counterpart. And it was strange that if you know the story of Baba and Meera, Baba kept her in seclusion, real, what you almost might call Muslim purdah. She was never allowed to see men or hear the voice of men or hear the names of men. They read the newspaper too without any men's names in it and all those things for years. But after this accident, she had to be taken care of by doctors and all. It broke that seclusion. And really, to me, my interpretation is that it symbolized, breaking the seclusion of women, that women have to progress, they have to go forward, and it's true, that the whole thing is coming more and more. This half of humanity is female, and they have to go forward with and it does start with suffering, there's no question about it, and breaking that seclusion. And so it's very significant that it happened in America. America is the leader now in women's liberation, or whatever the right word is. So it has that significance. Whatever else it has, I don't know. And so somehow I played a role, like carrying the shell to Meera. I just had to be there. I'm sure Baba kind of pulled me to that place. I thought I was going on my own little trip, But after I saw Baba, he came back to New York when he was, in the caste. They all came back, and Baba gave darshan again in New York. And when I first saw Baba, he smiled at me, and he wanted to tell me all about the accident. He smiled. His nose was, never the same again. It was out of time. His teeth were gone and all kinds of things. Wasn't the same person. But he smiled, and he said, America was after my blood for a long time. I mean, you just don't know what to say. And you see him in the cast on his leg and on his arm, and he's smiling about it all. And you can't cry because Baba doesn't want you to cry, I mean, it's really a funny situation. If you were down the mouth, he'd go like this. On the other hand, he gave me a chance to wheel him around in this sort of wheelchair they had, and I couldn't move it. Now, Baba's a slight man, even with the cast. For a moment, I tried, and it was like lifting, the Empire State. It was like incredible, a feeling of the weight of Baba's suffering. I mean, he does these little tiny occult things once in a while to give you, and then right away I could, but his eye looks at you, it's like he's really giving you. It's the same every time he comes. People rag me all the time, or used to, not so much young people, but why did Christ suffer? He didn't have to suffer. There was some lady here a while ago said, oh, that was his error. That was a mistake to die on the cross. That's true. I mean, but the Avatar does suffer. Yeah.
When we went to Oklahoma and visited the farmer.
Oh, yes, you did. Yeah.
He lived. The
has some
happened
Polish
right in
name.
the front of his house, and there was no other.
He was the one that called the ambulance.
But he said that if it hadn't rained the day before,
That's
Baba
right.
would have been killed.
I know.
Or
It's been so hard.
Baba so clearly. It was more. Well, I guess 25 years since the accident when I talked to him, he remembered it just like it was yesterday. And he said that they were just laying all over the place, and Baba was kind of in this bottom of this ditch, bleeding right into the water and dirt. And he called him the Reverend. He didn't know who he was, but he said it was like he was the only one he really noticed.
Remember.
Was the Reverend.
Well, the newspaper, you know how when Baba doesn't want publicity, we of course rush to all the newspapers. And I think only the Daily News, they had 2 lines, they had every name misspelled, totally garbled account, you know. It's like Baba didn't want anything about this thing that happened. Even in the papers there in Prague and everything. You know, I always run around looking, grabbing all the things like that for the archives. But the whole thing was very, very, very significant. I know Julius, see, they were in the second car, and they came up. They were very shocked. Baba had been bawling them out all morning. Why didn't they keep up with him? And she said she looked down, and all she could see in Baba's eyes was intense bliss, radiance. And they said that too, even in the second accident in India. You know, it's like, you know, I've done it. I've done what I've come to do. And
that was even worse, wasn't it?
Worse?
I mean, more on...
They were both...
Oh, the second accident was more painful. Yes, it was more traumatic. Bodily trauma was more irreparable. But the fact that it happened in America, I was thinking of it on, you know, just the past couple of weeks, May 24th. I always remember that day because what we went through hearing about it, you know, first we just get a cable telegram that had happened. We didn't know how bad anybody was hurt, and that was just agony to wait till the next one, you know, that explained. I think it would have been bad enough to be there, but it was also horrible not knowing and not having facts, and you know, it's just thinking what happened. It was really, and of course wrongly, but you think, gee, did this have to happen in our country? Did we have to do this? Our drunk drivers and everything. But Baba planned it. He wanted it. So. It means grace. It really is grace. There was another little moment with Baba. Darshan Hours is the name of a very sweet book that Rick Chapman did. Baba gave him these special messages to publish. When this was a happier time. In 56, Baba had recovered completely. He was walking like, he always just walked at a tremendous speed, you know, nobody could keep up with him. And he'd recovered the leg, you know, the broken leg had healed in July 56. And we spent a happy time with him at the center and then flew out here with him and went on. And then he came back in 58. And by that time, the second accident happened, and his hip was very, very painful. And actually, we carried him around a lot of the time at the center. The men did, and once, when the women complained, well, then Baba let the women carry him around in his chair. And again, Baba never showed this suffering, you know. He always, only when the day was over and maybe Elizabeth took him in his car, you know, might get a glimpse of it. The doctors all said, you have no idea that suffering that this hip injury was. Anyway, we were all seated with Baba. We'd gotten up real early to drive with him to, this is 58 now, to Wilmington Airport. There was no airport in Myrtle Beach then. And people in different cars were following Baba's car. Then we got into the airport. And that happened to be my birthday. That was May 31st. Like 7 in the morning. I thought, this is the greatest birthday I've had. Sitting here with Baba. Anyway, Baba said sweet things to us. But there was one car, they must have gotten hungry for breakfast or something. A couple people in a car, and they stopped and they came in late. You know, we had all just marched in with Baba. And Baba looked up, and he didn't, you know, say any names or anything, but he said, you know, God is always eager to enter your heart. But he can't enter your heart because of all the strangers there. When he sees the strangers in your heart, then he turns away, And he looked directly at these people, and I got kind of a flash that, they'd gone through the Savas with Baba. They're all excited maybe about going home and going back to husbands, this and that, and they were chatting together and having fun, having breakfast, and not paying attention to Baba, but this goodbye moment with him, And this is something like Baba said in this darshan. Oh, I should have stepped at the place. In God's plan to awaken everyone from the dream of creation and make him live in him and experience his infinite bliss, the law of opposites operates unfailingly to stage the so-called good and bad times, and in his compassion God leads everyone and everything towards himself, who is beyond good and bad. So there is nothing really to worry over. I am bliss eternal. I eternally suffer too, for remaining steeped in ignorance, as the being of everything and everyone in illusion. God the Beloved says to the lover, "Vacate your abode of its millions of strangers, then only will I enter. I feel shy of strangers." Baba continued, "And who are the strangers? Wants, desires, thoughts. They are all so compressed within you that they leave no room for God the Beloved, whom you would invite in. As the strangers leave the heart, it begins to become cleaner and more pure. Then God looks into it, and his all-loving glance wipes out all worries. The glimpse of God that one then experiences leaves no scope for any doubts about his sweet will that manifests through good and bad times. The God-realized soul lives in the world, but the world does not and cannot touch him. But to achieve God-realization is not child's play. For this, one has to surrender all, body, mind, and heart, to the perfect Master." At this point, someone quoted some lines with reference to an aspirant's intense longing for union with God. Baba liked the lines and said, "It is a nice quotation, but how does one create such a longing in his heart? That is the difficulty. One must feel from the core of his heart that it is impossible for him to live without seeing God. His condition should be like that of a fish taken out of water. When such longing continues, one has the fortune to see God as the ocean of effulgence. The intensity of longing necessary for becoming one with God can never be measured, however high the gross standard. Such longing is a rare experience, altogether unique, and it is exclusively for the one who is ablaze with a spark of divine love from the perfect Master." And that's what Baba says over and over. And this is true that you don't find it too much in other people's teachings, except someone like Sri Ramakrishna, who was the perfect Master, or Kabir, the perfect Masters, really make this point really clear, that this intense longing for God, the love, is what is necessary for union, and the gift of that love comes from the Perfect One. It's really a gift, and that is what Baba came. And what he does do right now is give the gift of love. It's something you just can't create, say, I want to love. It's a gift, and I think it's so wonderful that Baba still gives that gift, even though he's not in the body. He still gives that gift of love. And for that, we all can be very grateful.